We acknowledge that together we reside, learn, and create on the land of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Mississauga, Wendake, Neonwencio, and Neutral people.
We seek re-Indigenization. We stand with the Indigenous community and welcome Indigenous voices on this platform. We are grateful to be working and learning on and about this land, and we honor these communities as the traditional stewards of these lands.
Hi there, my name is Simi G. Patoka. My pronouns are they, them.
And hello, my name is Casa Morum, and my pronouns are she, her.
And we are
The Dreaming Divas.
we are a podcast inspired by the Screaming Divas.
And our goal is to create a similar platform, but from the perspective of young singers.
And today we had on one of my best friends, Laura Curiale, who is not only a great mezzo, but an amazing producer, and talks a little bit about how she got into that.
We are so excited to dive into this conversation. It was a really powerful one today, and it's all about following your own path, no matter what anybody else says, and just following your heart. So we hope you enjoy.
Check it out! Ding! I don't know which side it is, but I just do it anyways. Hi, bestie!
Hello.
Hi.
So, Laura Curiale, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yeah, no problem. Did I have a choice? No, I'm kidding.
You didn't. You didn't have the choice.
Oh my God.
But nonetheless, I'm really happy you're here.
I grew up in London, Ontario, Canada. I don't know. And so I was a part of choirs growing up, pretty formative choirs that really, I mean, I'm sure for most music people, is how I learned to sight read, how I learned to read music, how I learned to connect with music, how I learned to connect with other artists and sing in harmony and tandem with other people. And I think like was the reason why I was just like my eyes were open to how music can connect people. And I think like choir is really beautiful for that. So as I continued on in choir, I was in that choir for probably 10 years. And then I originally went into psychology in university. This might be a theme of our night. I originally went into psychology for a year. And then was like, nope. And then in psychology, I was also in therapy. And my therapist said to me, you know, I was doing a minor in music, which is a whole nother story of how I got into that minor. And I think Sim knows part of it. But basically, I was in a minor in music, and it's the only class that I really like was like engaged in, had friends in, like loved, even though I suck at theory. And my therapist said, well, why aren't you in music? And I said, good point. And so then I signed up for an audition that day. I taught myself the singing requirements. I was auditioning for voice, taught myself the requirements, found a pianist, a random pianist, and did the audition myself. And then didn't hear anything for the whole year. And then in August, I was like, hey, I emailed them. I was like, hey, I know I didn't get in, but like, do you have feedback? And they're like, oh my God, we forgot to tell you you got in. Here are your classes. And
I'll remember that part.
yeah. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then so then went into music degree. And then I was originally in education. And then I was like, oh, no, I really want to perform. Like, I just really want to be with shows and things like that, surrounded by performers. And so I auditioned for performance stream, didn't get in, was rejected in my first year, auditioned again in my second year, got in. And then that's kind of when Simi and I met too and became close. And then I went through the performance stream for the rest of my university career, performed in some operas, some musicals through London and the school. And then in my final year, I was auditioning for performance masters. as well as running the theater company on campus. And I think we'll chat a little bit about it tonight, but kind of just fell in love with production, fell in love with producing shows and all that comes with it, the chaos that comes with it. And then started my own theater company. And it's like, you know, I think I had this idea that I needed to have a career first, and then turns out you don't. And you can just say that you're a theater company and people will believe you. So yeah, that was way over 60 seconds. You were nice to me.
Oh, babe, it was 3 minutes. Okay, so you go through an undergrad of music, and then you apply to a master's degree.
Yeah, multiple
master's degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start one.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to finish this story?
Well, the spoiler alert is I did not finish that master's degree. I withdrew from that master's degree. It was a master's in opera performance. And there was a lot of things that kind of led up to it. So in my final year at Western, I co-ran the theater company on campus, and it was a wonderful experience. And I kind of had a couple moments in that experience. So that was a year-long kind of co-running that, and there was a lot of moments in that where I kind of started to realize in tandem I was also in an opera, I should say that. So I was on stage and also running behind the stage at the same time. And at that time, you know, in the opera, I was one of the principal roles in the opera, which is like, I still think is an incredible opportunity. Like, I learned so much about myself in that experience. As I was kind of looking around in rehearsals and also, you know, seeing how I was in rehearsals, like who I was, because I think that we are influenced by different environments. Like, we become different people in different environments. I, you know, just observing who I was in rehearsal and observing who I was running these executive meetings and running these, you know, and putting a show on, the production elements. I was totally different people. And one of them was I was riddled by fear and perfectionism as I stepped into rehearsals and stepped into a practice room alone. And then I'm stepping into these executive meetings and these production meetings, and I'm like, I'm running stuff. Like, I feel fulfilled. I feel full. And I feel like I know, like, not that I know what I'm doing, but that I have the capability to get there. And so so that was kind of happening at the same time. And at the same time, I was also looking at my peers. And so Simi knows this, I observe life a lot. And so I kind of figure out what I think and what, you know, and I kind of internally process and observe life. So I was also observing the other people in the room in my rehearsals. And I just realized that there was something in them that I didn't have. And it wasn't talent. I know that I am a good singer. I know that I work hard, and I worked hard for the positions that I got in school and the marks that I got. I know that I'm talented and a good performer. It wasn't that. It was this internal drive. It was this internal motivation. And I would look at people in the opera with me, the other principals, and they just eat, sleep, and breathe performing and these characters and bettering themselves with vowels and diction, which I think is beautiful. But it wasn't me. And I enjoyed performing and it was fun, but it wasn't this internal drive that I felt that my peers had. And not that I felt that they had, that they were expressing, you know, that they were verbalizing, that they had this drive and this motivation. So I kind of was realizing that in my final year as well. And also at the same time, wow, final year really had a lot going on. Also at the same time, me and one of my best friends and Simi's best friend are, you know, the end of our little trio. Josh, who also is the person that I started my theater company with, we kind of, he also was co-running this theater company with, or this campus theater company with me. And we just started realizing the holes in not only theater, but in opera, these holes of the supports for emerging artists and these holes of, well, there's so many people in school. And I remember like this one week where I was really riddled with anxiety about my master's and whatever and everything else that goes along with being in a music program. And I remember going to multiple teachers and saying, well, what do I do next? And they would say things in their great teacher ways of, oh, well, you'll do this master's and then this young artist program and then whatever, like these are the steps. And then I said, no, like, what do I do next? Like, like what should I how do I audition? How do I find an audition outside of school? How do I sign a manager? How do I approach a manager? How do I do this and these small little things that I felt that these were not provided or supported for students. Specifically going out into opera, but I also, as we were running the theater company, and there was a lot of people in neuroscience, in psychology, in all these things that are getting undergrads and basically saying, I'm going into acting. And they also were like, I don't know how to do that. I feel like the thing that here in Canada that we say is you move to Toronto and you figure it out. Like, or, you know, if it's the States, you move to New York and you figure it out. You move to LA and you figure it out. Well, I don't think that humanity is meant to figure it out, or I don't think that humanity is meant to figure it out on by ourselves. I really wanted to figure out these different support systems. So Josh and I started thinking up a development model. So we were also really moved by essentially the fact that there is relatively no well-loved canonical Canadian theater. Like there just isn't. And so and musical theater and opera, like, let's be honest, right? And so we also were kind of coming up with this development model of how do we've jigged it a little bit now through the theater company, but we originally had it at a 7-month model where we would bring in brand new playwrights and partner them and essentially cast with new artists, new actors and singers, cast their shows, do development workshops, and then actually get published playwrights, published composers, all this to watch. So we would create like a network system for them that they could continue on and have those networks past their time with us, but also to come in and actually give feedback on the work. And kind of go through those trenches with somebody that knows how to make something work and knows what doesn't work and can look at it with that critical eye. And so we were kind of coming up with this development model as well at the same time. So all these things are kind of going at the same time. And then I got into my master's, and I think there was an excitement. And there was, and you know, I kind of have come to terms with the feelings that have been around it before, but at the time I accepted, and I was moving out of town and quite far away. And so my voice teacher wanted it, other people wanted it. It was very exciting. I knew that I was ready. And so months later, I ended up getting into that school and with a full ride scholarship, all paid for, everything, and went. And throughout that summer, so there's about 4 months before I left. Throughout the summer, I was actually in the park talking to Simi, and I remember saying to you, Sim, that like, yeah, I'm gonna do this master's, and I was justifying it. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, but like, it's not the end goal. Like, I had pretty much decided I'm gonna be a producer. I'm going to produce and I'm going to create opportunities. I'm going to create rooms for people to work in. And I remember saying to Sim, you know, I'm going to do this master's, and then it's going to, you know, it's going to, whatever. It's good to have MA. It's good to have all these more schooling and whatever. Like, it doesn't matter that I'm going to be a producer or whatever. And then after that, I'll get a job. And then further down, like 10 years down the line, I'll start my theater company that I want. And I'll like be able to like create these support systems for emerging people. And then I went, even though I was already like, I'm just gonna do it and then move on. And in my first lesson, I walked in. We were chatting with my new teacher. She did how voice teachers do it. I sang, and it was completely internal, and I was like, nope, I'm I'm not supposed to be doing this master's. And it would, again, it's those spontaneous things that kind of come up in my life where I'm just like, yep, like that's it. And so I just knew. And then I again justified it to myself and said, well, that's okay. Like you knew that. So now just do the work and move on. Do the work, get your degree, do the 2 years, whatever. And I remember again just being overwhelmed with perfectionism and anxiety, and like I know that those are really real problems for performers. And so I remember, and it was added on to this whole idea of I don't have the drive to be here. So it was like I'm feel anxiety and perfectionism to be amazing, and then also riddled with like I have no motivation to be amazing. So like, you know what I mean? So it was like there was nothing driving me. And also too this idea that like I knew like that I didn't have that internal drive to perform anyways. And now it's like I don't even have any. So basically I like, stayed afloat and everything. And I would call my sister every night and cry and cry and cry and cry and just be like, I just have to do my paper. I just have to learn this music. And it was like the joy. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. It was like the joy of singing was being ripped away from me. And I couldn't remember what it felt like to enjoy singing and to enjoy performing. I remember then one night I was FaceTiming my sister and I was crying. I said, I just have to do it. I just have to do this master's. And my sister said, we don't have to do this master's. I was like, what? And so that was like one of the days. And the second day, so like then I went to bed, cried, went to bed. The next morning, I like turned off my computer, I turned off my phone, I went for a 6-hour walk around the city. And like again, was just like thinking about what do I want? And I was realized that I was completely riddled by the fears of what people would think of me after I put all this work in and now I'm leaving or choosing something different. And I did a pros and cons list and and genuinely all the cons were, what would this person think of me? This person will hate me. This person, do you know what I mean? And so I just was like, and then I realized like the fear of people hating me and the fear of people thinking I'm a failure was not worth this feeling right now. And so I started the process of withdrawing from my master's, which was a lot longer of a process than I think some people think. And so I went to the leader of the opera and my specific voice teacher were the same person. I felt really strongly that I was going to stand in the face of my fear and confront my fear, which meant going to each of my teachers individually, face to face, and telling them I'm leaving. And it was really important to me. So I made meetings with all of my professors, and each one of them was like, "Yeah, like okay, like this sounds great, like for sure." And even as I was doing, rehearsals for the opera, one of the music directors owns her own opera company as well. And I was I was talking to her about my fourth year and what I want to do, and she even said to me, she said, "You don't sound like a performer, Laura. Like you sound like you're a producer. Like why are you here?" And that was in September. And so I went to her and she was like, "This is incredible." And she invited her opera company that weekend was doing a conference, and she was like, "Don't even worry about paying for the ticket, come to all 3 days of the conference." It was about 4 opera producers and theater producers. And I said, "Okay, great, like yeah, I'll come." And it was incredible. Like I would work with that company in a heartbeat. And then I told all my other professors and they were like, "Yeah, this is fine, like for sure." And then I remember making a meeting with my specific voice teacher, and she was also the leader of the opera, like the opera lead. And so I made a appointment with her, and I was terrified. Like I was terrified. I thought she was gonna yell at me right there. I thought that she was gonna like tell me I'm an idiot, tell me whatever. And I sit. She's so cute. She's like a 5 foot, like nothing, little French lady, and and I had been over to her house multiple times for like dinner and for like she's just so warm and sweet. And there's no merit to me being scared to tell this woman. And I sit down and, she could see that I was really struggling, mentally. And I've struggled with depression before. So she kind of was aware of that and aware of getting me supports. And she was really great. And I sit down and I look her in the eye and she goes, Laura. I go, yes. And she goes, what is it, Laura? And then I say, I'm just gonna tell you right away, be direct. I'm withdrawing from this master's. And she goes, Laura! She's so cute. And you know what? Like, and she and we talked for about like 45 minutes, and she was really supportive. And she said, I'm so used. She's like, I just told her like that drive in me isn't there, and all the things that I mentioned before. And she just said, I'm usually better at noticing it. Voice teachers are very in tune. She said, I'm so much better at noticing it. And she said, I really thought you wanted it. And I looked at her and I said, I really wanted to want it. And she was like, that makes complete sense to me. And so I was like, yeah. And that was kind of how I made sense of the last like kind of year and a half. At that up until that point was like, I really wanted to want this. I really wanted to want this life. I took a couple days and then I sent in the paperwork to formally withdraw from my master's, and I got confirmation back essentially right away. And the whole next day, I wept and wept and wept and cried and cried and cried and just like didn't get out of bed. And it wasn't, and I've told people this story and they say, oh, well, do you regret it? No, I've never once, a day has not gone by that I don't regret leaving that master's and essentially leaving opera singing behind. But I cried the next day, the whole next day, because I was grieving the life I thought I was going to have. And I was grieving the person that I was yesterday. And while I love the person that I am today, and while I feel like I've grown so much, she was real and she wanted to want it. And, she was there and she was down this path and there was a future set out for her. And I think I was grieving what that could have been. And so I was really, really sad. I had to stay up in the city for quite a while, about 2 months, to transfer over my lease and everything. I got a seasonal job up there, and it was really good for me to. I'd never lived on my own about that point. I was living completely on my own in a studio apartment. I was in a different city. It was really beautiful and good for me to understand who I was for those 2 months and what I was capable of. And that was kind of December, January. In December, I, texted Josh and I said, I really just want to create theater. And COVID was like rampant. And especially in the city I was in, it was like we were in lockdown, like you can't leave your house, lockdown. And I remember texting Josh and I was like, I just want to create theater again. Like I just want something. I want to organize something. And he's like, well, let's do it. So we organized a virtual reading, live streamed reading of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. It was a really simplified stage version. There's about 12 parts in that. So we just contacted a lot of our friends who are actors. We did 3 rehearsals virtually over Zoom. And then we kind of broadcast it, and we got just over 50 households watching. Um, and we like learned how to live stream and learned how to all these different like things that were like insane. Did you know that YouTube has to take 24 hours to verify your account before you can live stream? I now know that. So so it's a lot of things like that, like little small things that again, like I get so much fulfillment out of figuring out. And like I even said, and I've said this to Sim before, like I find so much more creativity and fulfillment figuring out the behind the scenes than I really ever did on stage. I felt creativity and I felt flow and I felt, but it wasn't to this extent. Like I like figuring that out about YouTube was like the hardest, but also like the most fulfilling thing I've ever experienced. Like what's holding us back? And we both had kind of said, we need to have careers, we need to have status, we need to have credibility, whatever. And I just said, why? Like, why? So we launched, we made a quick graphic that now that we're like an actual theater company, it's like our thing now. Both of us are like, we should have spent more time on it. And but it's we kind of came up with a name. It's First Steps Theater. We have a website, firststepstheater.com, if you want to go see it, check it out. Um, but we really wanted to be the first steps of some of these developments, the first steps of these playwrights, these actors, these supports, right? And the first steps into a blooming career, a flourishing career. And so or First Steps Theater. We made a quick graphic in one day, made a Facebook page, posted the Facebook page, and in day one, we had over 200 likes of our Facebook page. And then the day two, we announced that we were needed submissions because we are going to do development, like short developments, a shortened version of our development model. And we had submissions like then and there, and then we started making, and then like other theater companies and other producers started reaching out to us, just to network and everything. And I've never, and I hope Simi can say this too, like I've never felt more myself than in the last 7 months, and I've never like come into my own than in the last 7 months of my life.
Even for me, just to hear like somebody else's story and watching you or hearing that you truly followed your heart and your gut and you knew that there was something else calling you, you had a different purpose, and that you were able to follow it. It's hard to do stuff like that. And I think everyone needs to hear this story. And I think that is why Simi and I created something like this, to share these stories and to show young singers, young musicians, and artists that there is not one path.
It's also so nice to hear how okay it is to change your mind. Because I think when we're in it, like for Cass and I being on this road and really sure that this is what we want to do, there's almost like a negative connotation that comes with deciding you want to do something else. And it's like super duper okay to decide you want to do something else. And even in the economy and the life of a singer these days, you're probably going to end up doing something else in addition to it just to
Yeah.
survive. So I think even if you decide to veer away from it completely to do other things, it's so okay.
Yeah, and I think too, what I really had to deal with and come to terms with as well, and I always say, and I've said it to Simi a bunch of times, like at some point down the line, I'm gonna like reform the education system, because I have so many things wrong with it. But, but I think also too, music school is really difficult because it's an incredible time to like fine tune your instrument and to fine tune your knowledge of your instrument, your history of your instrument, your theory. It's beautiful. But it also is detrimental because it's so fine tuned that you forget that you're a whole human being. You forget that you're anything else other than this degree and this instrument. And
Yeah,
so like I am a self-proclaimed historian as well. I work at a historic museum. I'm an interpreter. I'm a weaver. I'm a knitter. And there's so many other things that I am that are healthy that you should have. You are a complete whole human being. And it's difficult. And I wouldn't even say it's isolated to music. I would say it's amplified in a music degree. I felt it in psychology as well, and I know that other people feel it, is when you're so focused on one thing, you're so fine tuned, you forget that you're a whole human being. You have other likes and interests and passions and fulfillments and other people in your life and like things like that are really difficult. And so when you leave even your undergrad, I think that it's really interesting to watch what people do, because there are people like you, Cass and Simi, where I know 100% because Sim and I have had these conversations. Sim, this is what you want to do. You have that. And it's really interesting to watch people because you left your undergrad and you're like, I'm going to have the motivation to do these things on my own. I'm going to start this podcast. I'm going to watch these operas, whatever. And there are other people that leave and then they remember, oh my gosh, I really like playing guitar. Wow, I really like estheticians and doing hair, and do you know what I mean? And it's really interesting how people kind of what manifests after you leave school. And so I would even say to like give it a second, like leave school, like graduate, you know, figure out and there's time. Like
Yeah.
there's so much time. You can I could also have this theater company, not that the plan is, but I could have this theater company for a year and change again. Like there's so much time in life,
Yeah.
you know.
That is, and it's so good to reflect on that as well. I mean, just finishing my undergrad and knowing that I have a purpose in performance, but leaving it in this time I've reflected. I did one summer program, that was it. Usually my summers are packed. I really have not sung that much. I'm gonna say that right now. I've taken like a second because I know in the fall I'm gonna be like 90% of myself is probably gonna have to be, you know, focusing on that at in Toronto.
Mhm.
But I know that there are also I have a purpose in many other things other than singing. And I know that that doesn't negate like what I can do in this world in the opera world. Um, but have felt that pressure that it should only to be an artist. It that is it. That is your life, and I will respectfully disagree with that because I think that there are so many other things that can fulfill what I'm here for. Um,
Yeah.
and I've taken this time that I finished my undergrad. It took a little bit longer, and and I was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take a break.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not feel that, I have to be an artist 100% of my life because there are other parts of me that are just as worthy, that are just as deserve the time it needs. And I think it's healthy to do that too, because I think there can be things that become really detrimental to health in all aspects of health.
Yeah. And I would also say too, like for artists, if there are artists watching this, like your job, even if you're like 100%, I'm supposed to be a performer, I'm supposed to tell these stories. Your job is to tell stories.
Mm.
So if you aren't collecting stories along the way, or if you aren't collecting experiences and feelings and emotions, and if you're not a whole human being that experiences other things in life, you cannot do your job accurately. You
Yep.
cannot do your job to the fullest extent and potential that I know that you want to do. And so collect those stories, collect those experiences, collect those other passions and those other things and experience like parts of life. You know, when I bring up my weaving, people are like, weaving? Like, do you know what I mean? So like experience other aspects of life, other people's stories, go meet other people. Don't sit in a practice room alone all the time. Like please sit in a practice room, but like not all the time,
Yeah.
right? So that you can do your job accurately and tell stories accurately with well-rounded experience.
Another reason why we're doing this is because we feel like it's very hard for people to dive into the world of opera or being performers or finding out how to do the thing. Really?
Yeah.
And even though some people have voice teachers, some voice teachers don't even like explain the fullness of it. There's not time to. Um, so yeah, that is really interesting that your company is also about that and helping people forward with that. Do you want to chat a little bit more about how you can do that with artists or even people who want to produce?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a really good point. So, for anybody that's watching that wants to kind of be involved with First Steps in any way, whether that's an audience member, whether that's working with us, whether that's just volunteering, everything is available on our website, firststepstheater.com.
Amazing.
Um, and so yeah, there's a couple different things that we do. So right now we are doing small um workshops for playwrights. So we're focusing on playwrights right now. One, because there aren't a lot of opportunities for emerging playwrights. And we say that not because there aren't any. There's some amazing programs and amazing, support systems. I say that because as we all know, there is a rise of mainstream musicals. Great. I love a musical. I also just think that there's a lot more supports for them because they make a lot more money. And so so we are focusing on plays. That's one aspect. Second is that it also just takes less resources. So we are spending this time focusing on plays. Our goal is to be able to actually have multiple development streams going at the same time, hopefully for plays, operas, and musicals.
Amazing.
Obviously, operas and musicals take more resources and also take longer to develop. A play can relatively be developed well in a year and published. A musical can take 5 to 10 years, an opera maybe even longer. So we're just we're taking this time to focus on plays and setting ourselves up with the resources to do musicals and operas. So right now we take submissions for plays all the time. Does not matter the length. We do ask that it's in PDF format. You can find that link on our website. We also we have an open general audition call. Again, you can find that link on our website. We're going to be casting our next development workshop or a play reading actually in August, so in a couple weeks. So keep an eye out for that for our next reading in September. And right now we're doing shorter development projects, so about 2 to 3 weeks of rehearsals, and then a live stream workshop with feedback, 3 different forms of feedback, including invited creatives. If you have a project that might not fit within what we're looking for right now as part of our next couple virtual readings, we are always open to conversation. So you can email us at firststepstheater@gmail.com as well. About like the shows that we're taking to Fringe is actually a playwright, Abhimanyu Acharya, who he actually came and said, I have this idea, it's not written yet. I have this idea and I want to develop it in rehearsals, like actually with actors there. And
Wow.
so he emailed us, pitched it to us. We had a meeting with him and just said, okay, what is this going to look like if we say yes? And we were like, this is awesome. So we actually partnered with him, casted based off his character descriptions, and then throughout development workshops and improv sessions actually with these actors, created a script in rehearsals. And so it was really fun. And we're actually taking that script to the Fringe Festival to stage in person. So like it looks different ways for sure. And we are always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for actors and playwrights and just ideas and for young people to feel like there's somewhere that they can, go off on the branch and go off on the limb, and that there's a net underneath them, and there's a person holding onto the trunk, and I'm like holding their hand as they walk out onto the limb. And so that's kind of how I visualize my role in it. And it also, again, First Steps Theater everything. So firststepstheater.com, First Steps Theater on Instagram, and firststepstheater@gmail.com. Just have a conversation with us. Yeah.
Through being a musician and going through the undergrad and even a little bit of the masters, could you bring any of that musician training knowledge and bring that into your producing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of different facets of that. Firstly, it gives me, because I've been on stage, it gives me incredible patience and also understanding throughout a development process and the anxieties and perfectionism that I know are in that environment as a performer. So I can pre-plan for that. So, when it comes to, I know we've all probably received rehearsal schedules and been like, I'm supposed to be off book by this date. That's not going to happen. Do you mean like things like that, right? So because I know those, I can pre-plan for those, right? So I relatively know a good schedule. I also have this, I know when I've received an email that says all the information that you need to know, and it has none of the information you need to know. So, you know what I mean? So I understand as a performer where my anxiety's at, what do I need to know as a performer? For example, call times, but not only call times, specific locations, not just theater, like like come in this door, like you know what I mean, like all those little things too. So it's been able, as I've been in the spot of being at liberty of all of the organizers as a performer, I now know from the other side, what do they need and what can I give them and how can I pre-plan so that the actors actually feel really, really supported. Again, I would also say that so that's like one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is like um, there are times in rehearsals when you bring things up, and I'm not talking about really serious conversations. I'm talking about things about character, about blocking, about overall vision for the show. There are things that you bring up in rehearsals um, that I think sometimes can be just shot down, which is fine, right? But which is fine, and some would say part of the way that it goes. I would also say, like, I always felt like there was not so in the experiences I had. I'm not going to say everyone. The experiences I had, I would say that there wasn't always a conversation. There wasn't always open feedback. I'm uh, very adamant about the fact that there is a hierarchy of role and of information and of clarity and of decision making, but there is not a role in who's better than somebody else. So specifically in First Steps Theater, we have a very serious feedback mandate where even though I would say I'm general director there's actors, we actually have spaces in our meetings where they have opportunities to give me feedback. They have opportunities to give me feedback on how I've been conducting, how I've been speaking to people, how I've been conducting my emails, my meetings, things like that. Within our senior meetings with the artistic director and with the marketing director, we have about 10-15 minutes at the beginning of every meeting where it's an opportunity for feedback. And there is, and so there is a conversation. We also are very adamant with all of our participants that if you have a question or concern, not just about the information that we're giving you, but about where you think our morals and ethics lie. Where do we lie on certain topics that are important in theater, that are important in creative making? Reach out to us. We are a Zoom meeting away. We want to have those conversations with you, open up those conversations. So it's interesting in that way too, of like being in those spaces where I didn't always feel like there was a conversation, being able to say from the beginning with First Steps, like, we will have those conversations.
Yes.
We'll open up opportunities to have those conversations. I would also say artistically, there's definitely a work ethic and a performance aspect to my job as well as producer. A lot of my job, as a performer was like, if you have it, like, there's like 100%, right? That's your performing life. 10% is on stage. 90% is alone crying in a practice room. like, like, so
Yep.
like it's like really exciting. Okay, I would say like, okay, 85% is alone crying in a practice room. 10% is on stage. 5% is actually, schmoozing and like after the show when everyone comes see you. I would say that like it's pretty much the same. Like there is a time where I'm really dedicated and I'm working alone at my desk and I'm doing the organization and I'm writing the emails and having the phone calls and whatever. There's the time where I'm networking and performing, essentially, where it's showtime and I'm doing the technical aspect and I'm right. And then there's 5% where I'm networking and I'm bringing out or I'm at a networking party with other producers and things like that, where I am schmoozing, essentially, right? And so it's set up the same way. I'm just using a different instrument. I'm not using my voice. I'm using my brain. I'm using my administrative skills. I'm using my overall bird's eye vision of a show rather than how does my character fit into this, right? So it's just a different view. I would say almost every aspect other than physically using my voice is used in producing.
There is constant tug of war and constant struggle to be heard as a singer. Despite the fact that you are on stage singing over an entire orchestra, when it comes to the behind the scenes, being heard is so difficult. And so the feedback thing that you were talking about is so impactful. But do you find, being on that side, do you see the struggle that the performers have to go through to be heard?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sim. So when we cast, and when we bring on anybody, I even did this with the marketing director when we brought them onto the team. When we bring anyone into First Steps community, Josh and I actually have a meeting with them, where we talk through healthy, well-given feedback. Because there is a section or there is a time in life when, you can say this is feedback, but really you're just being cruel. And I think that that's where we can get really detriment, because everybody in a rehearsal room, even though it doesn't look like it, everyone in a rehearsal room is being vulnerable. Everybody is scared in that moment to different extents, whether they're aware of it or not. It's vulnerable. That's why so many wounds happen in the rehearsal room. And so I think like we Josh and I have a meeting with anyone we bring in, and we just say, we lay out healthy, well-given feedback. We have a couple of resource videos as well that we require them to watch. And then we have a conversation and bring up, do you have any questions about how we've laid out well-given feedback? Do you have any questions about how feedback is going to work when we're in the development process? And so that is a really good place to start, because everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows the requirements and expectations of feedback. And then further to that, we do say that we actually, everybody that is a participant with us has to sign a contract. And in the contract, we lay out verbal and or direct and indirect bullying and negative feelings. And we also sign that if there is any tension in rehearsal rooms or outside of the rehearsal room, that we will be contacted first. That we want to be able to set up mediations. We want to be able to be in the room. We want a conversation. We want to know what's happening, because even specifically my role, I'm not in the rehearsal room all the time. And so they have to sign that contract as well. So they know that their expectation is to contact us. If they feel uncomfortable, if they feel like it's towards them, if they see it, they know that their expectation is to contact us. So again, making sure everyone's on the same page to speak their voice. Further to that, and we've had multiple times where participants have contacted us and we've said something, and they've said, I don't agree with that. And we've said, well, here's the Zoom link, here's the time we're meeting, let's chat it out in person. And I think that is, I've always been, and this is with feedback too, I've always been very adamant that expectations start at the top. You lead how you want your company to be run. You lead how you want people to react, and also, go that way. So I'm also the first person in a meeting, in front of everyone, in front of all the participants for the Fringe, in front of all the participants, whatever show we're doing. If I made a mistake, I am very adamant that I need to say it to the group. I'm sorry, that was my fault. Let's move on from that, right?
And we have been asking every one of our guests this question. We think it's so powerful and cool to hear everybody else's why. So we were wondering, what is your why for what you do?
That's really interesting and really difficult. It's always like, I feel like I'm on like a university exam when they like ask a really open-ended essay question and you have like the last 30 minutes to answer it, and you're like,
I know, you really should have started with that question so you had time to think about it and go back, but we like to put our guests on the spot, apparently.
That's a really good question. I would say that like my why in life, so I subscribe a lot to minimalism, which I thought was a cult until I actually looked into it. But it's not. So people listening, like, look into it. Anyways, but they like minimalists, whatever, have a really good idea of like, basically, and I do this too, when we get so fixated specifically in westernized culture of what do you do, and then you say your job. Well, what if we asked that question, what do you do? And it was, oh man, I snowboard every day. Or, like I love Netflix. Like that's what I do. Like that's who I am. Again, talking back to that fulfillment. So I think like I don't necessarily feel like I have a why of like I'm working towards this goal or I'm working towards this thing. I think that like my why in life is moments like this where, there is something in the air, and I felt it with performing too, and I know you guys have too, where you're performing and there's something in the air. No one on earth has been able to articulate in words what that is yet. I'm waiting for a research paper, I'm waiting for a master's paper, but there is nothing, where there's something in the air that will never be there again. The next night will be a different audience. The next time we have a conversation will be a different circumstance, will be a different time of the day. None of it will be the same. This moment right here, where we can tell that all three of us are connected, there's something in the air in each of our rooms, there's something that we have been tethered to with each other. Because in those moments, I feel the most fulfilled in life.
Yes.
Like in these moments where I'm performing and I feel it with the audience, where I am having a deep, meaningful conversation with somebody and light bulbs go off and I feel tethered to that person. When I'm, when I'm at a show and I'm sitting in the audience and the person beside me is crying and I feel connected to that person, I feel like I don't have to work anymore in life. I feel like I don't have to strive for anything in life. I feel fulfilled in that moment. And then when it dissipates, it's like, okay, well, on to the next thing. And I do feel like sometimes we get into this rut of we're working. Well, what if our whole point here, and what if the whole why on earth is that we're working and striving to feel this? And so if that is why we're doing that, then why have we kind of been distracted by all these other things and not doing this? So I think like that is my why, to continually be in circumstances where I have this feeling, this fulfilled feeling, where I feel right now as if I could never leave this moment. Like this feeling will stay with me forever. And the sad part is that it doesn't always. So I find the next one, and I find the next one, and I find the next one. This thing in the air that no one can actually use words to articulate yet, like in the world, no one has been able to articulate or measure it. You can't harness it. It's not man-made. You can't measure it. You can't describe it in words, but every single person on the face of the earth knows that it's there. That is incredible. That is something that you need to chase. Not this stupid things that we man make, not these stupid things that we say are success, but this thing that like every single person on the face of the earth feels it and understands what I'm explaining and describing.
40 minutes to do rapid fire. We just said fire, we didn't do the rapid part.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Rapid fire.
One. Okay. Do you have a party trick? And if so, what is it?
Oh, I used to be able to. I used to be really into Eminem, and so my party trick is that I used to be able to rap any Eminem song like to a T. I have recently been like, Eminem's probably problematic. I don't like him anymore. And so I genuinely haven't listened to Eminem. Like maybe like here or there, maybe like Love the Way You Lie, you know what I mean? But like not probably in like 10, like not 10 years, like probably 5 or 6 years I haven't listened, so I couldn't do that anymore. Party trick. I'm usually like in the corner knitting at a party, so.
What is something that made you happy today?
Oh no. Well, my sister brought the Starbucks.
Good one.
So that made me really happy.
Okay, I feel like maybe I know this answer now. But what is your hobby?
Oh yeah. Well, knitting. Well, textiles. I like to say textiles.
Okay.
So knitting, weaving. My sister spins wool. Me and my sister also dye yarn. With natural dyes. I'm part of the London District Weavers and Spinners Guild. So we kind of get together. I also kind of sew a little bit.
Crochet.
And then sorry, say it again.
Crochet.
I crochet as well. And then I would also say that like I'm really I'm a self-proclaimed historian. Like I really enjoy just understanding what came before us and why we do the things today that we just accept.
So awesome.
Where is your happy place?
Okay, there's a couple. Because like I know the answer that people want to hear. All y'all watching, I know what you want to hear. It's like a place. Yeah, that's PEI, Prince Edward Island. I went there. I got off the ferry and I wept it was like a spiritual experience. I had come home. What is truly my happy place is my bed. Where I always say that my whole day is just a slow crawl back to my bed. So I would say my bed with Netflix on. Don't even. Yeah, I don't even need to talk to people for a couple days.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Whoa, you want me to answer that in on 5 minutes? But sometimes people aren't gonna like you, and that living to to please other people it has been the cause of a lot of my depression. And so I think I would say, like, people just sometimes people won't like you. Sometimes people won't like what you say. And so I think that just encouraging my younger self of, like, there was a lot of times when I just did what was expected of me, and tried to and thought that success in life was being well liked, and success in life was being quiet and kind and everything. While those are things that I do are staples of who I am, I will be kind, I will be all these things. I also, though, have a mind and an opinion, and they're valid. And so I think I would say, I would just encourage her and say, like, sometimes you won't be liked, but at the same time, on the other side of vulnerability and on the other side of saying some things that people won't like is great joy and great freedom and is great authenticity. And you're going to find people that really agree with what you say and really align with you. And those people are going to be beautiful. So, yeah, I would say, like, it's okay to be not liked sometimes.
What is your favorite beverage?
Oh, Tim Hortons medium steep tea, 2 milk, 2 sweeteners.
So, okay, can I just tell you, we talked about what questions we're going to ask, and then we split it into 2 sections, and we are pulling them from this hat. And they were like, okay, she's going to say a medium or steep tea with, like, exact order. I was like, really?
That moment, I think, just solidified Simi in my relationship. And I probably go to Tim Hortons 3 to 4 times a day, and that's my drink of choice. So that's my beverage. Like, legitimately, there's been times, and Simi's been at these parties where, like, it's like bring your own booze, like, whatever. I show up with the tea. Like, I show up with the Tim Hortons. That's my choice for the night.
It's Tim Hortons in one hand and your purse of knitting and stuff in the other. Yeah. I remember when we've had a few solidifying friendship moments, but I remember the first one was when we went to Tim's at one of the buildings on campus between classes, and you and I chatted for probably 2 hours. Yeah. And that was in my head our first friendship moment.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful. And what did she order? Steep tea, 2 milk, 2 sweetener. Yeah. Okay.
And I would say, like, most of my core friendships have been solidified at a Tim Hortons. So
yeah, that reads.
It's literally, and I've said this to Simi. You can cut this out if you want, but I've said this to Simi, that one of the reasons I haven't moved out of Canada yet is because other places don't have Tim Hortons. And, like, that's genuine. Like, that's real. That's a real thing, Cass.
We're really getting to know each other here.
Yes.
I also am like, I don't own a Tim Hortons franchise in my life. What am I doing with my life? You know what I mean?
What I think you should do is get Tim Hortons to sponsor First Steps. I love this question because I know you're a self-proclaimed historian. If you could travel to any year to meet somebody, past or future, who would you want to meet?
Interesting. So my favorite era is 1840s, to the 1860s Victorian England. There's a lot of people in that time period that I would love to meet. I'd love to meet Queen Victoria. I would only want to meet her, though, before Prince Albert died, because after Prince Albert died, like, my interpretation, she wasn't, like, exactly, like, open to people. So I would want to meet her before that. I can't remember his name right now, but the guy that invented the sewer system, the modern sewer system, and essentially saved like thousands upon thousands of Victorian English people from cholera because they would poo in the same river that they would get their water from, and then they didn't understand that that would cause you to have cholera and die. So a lot of people, like infants and children, like that's why the life expectancy was so short.
Who took you to your first opera and what was it?
Wow. Okay, this is gonna be kind of a lame answer because I had never been to an opera until university. I had listened to opera music and I knew what opera was, but I remember first year I went alone. First year I went alone and it was it Carmen?
No, Carmen was when I was there. It must have Flute probably.
No, was it Sor Angelica, the first one? You weren't there.
Maybe. I don't even know they did it that soon.
Yeah, they did it in my first year. That's why there was also a big uproar that they did it so soon after as well. Anyways, but the double Puccini opera where it's Johnny Skiki and Sor Angelica.
They just ignore the first one.
Just actually that cast was really good. I remember. But Sor Angelica I remember was my first year sight reading teacher. It was Jen Sear.
I love Jen Sear. Yes.
She's incredible and she's incredible soprano. And she was Sor Angelica and I remember like I'd never been to an opera before and I went alone on a Saturday night and I was just like floored. I was like incredible.
But if heaven exists, what do you want God to say at the pearly gates?
Wow, that's a really good one. And Simi and I have had a lot of conversations about this because I am a spiritual person and I don't necessarily agree theologically that we are living our lives out to go somewhere. I do think that we live our lives out because at one point heaven and earth were together. Obviously, something happened. And I do think that we live our life to continually create pockets where heaven and earth can collide again. And I do think that when I'm talking about this idea of this thing in between us, you know, this thing that's tethering us together that we can't harness and everything, I do like my belief is that we are creating moments in that time, in those moments when heaven and earth are colliding, and that's actually that complete fulfillment is what we are meant to feel as human beings in heaven. And so I think that's really difficult for me. I would say like the classic answer of like, good job. Like you did the best with what came at you. You did the best you could. And I think like that's what I'm searching for on earth. And I've found people in life that have been able to do that for me. And not in an egotistical way, like tell me I'm amazing, but like I think everybody needs somebody to say, no, you're doing a good job. And I'm excited for that when that happens. It's gonna be really fun. And we'll see if my imposter syndrome is still there. But no.
Yeah, I mean, if God is telling you and you still have imposter syndrome, fair. Therapy.
Therapy. I'm sure there's a whole section up in heaven of just like,
yeah, can it be can it be like government pays for therapy up there?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But government being like just God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For sure.
Well, Laura, thank you so much. I mean, this was a blast for me. I always love talking to you, obviously. But I'm so glad we got to talk to you and hear a very different perspective.
For sure. No, it's been incredible. Like, you guys are so fun. And again, I'm a little mad that I didn't wear black.
Really, it's not black, I promise.
Are you sure?
No, this has been incredible, and I think it's a really important topic for, you know, as you guys are creating this podcast and this platform of these emerging artists. And, you know, I like your name, Dreaming Divas, and I think it's a really good important topic to you know, tackle and open the conversation at the beginning of like, it's okay, you don't have to choose opera, that's okay, you know. So yeah,
I'll talk to you soon.
should we like focus, should we like actually bring this into
no
No.
No, we shouldn't.
This is like every phone call Sammy and I have. So I'm so sorry, Cass. I heard this quote once in a podcast, and I want to get it tattooed on my body. But it said, this person said, "I love humanity but hate humans," and I was like,